Welcome to the Career Refresh Podcast. I'm your host, Jill Griffin. I'm a former media and marketing executive turned career strategist and executive coach. I spent my career working my way up and through the ranks of global organizations and startups, and today I show others how to do the same. Join me each week as we discuss the strategies and actionable steps to leverage your strengths, increase your confidence, and develop your career well-being. Ready? Let's do it. Hey there, I'm Jill Griffin, and this is the Career Refresh. Today, I'm introducing you to Kristen Leone. She is a digital transformation and strategy expert at Google. Kristen is a strategic leader who combines the growth mindset of an entrepreneur with the creative discipline of a brand owner. She works with Google's largest customers, sharing insights on innovation and consumer experiences to help transform their businesses with digital as the primary driver. She concurrently serves as head of industry for home and consumer services category, where she partners with advertisers in the automotive, real estate, and home securities industries. Before Google, Kristen led sales strategy teams at the Weather Company, an IBM business, and WebMD. She co-founded the venture-backed startup Jor, the digital platform for wholesale management in contemporary fashion, and she honed her skills as a classically trained brand manager at General Mills. Kristen holds an MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and a BA from Princeton University. In this episode, we discuss how your fit for your job may change over time and really thinking about the delta between your needs and the company's ever-changing needs and how that might shift. We also share some real examples about how that shifting desire and what you might do about it. And it doesn't always mean leaving your company. We talk about how very often people confuse purpose and think that your job and your purpose is the same thing. And it may be for some, but it's often not for most of us. And then lastly, we talk about a framework for discernment around career decisions. Kristen is the leader, seriously, that you wish you worked for. I wish I worked for her. She is super strategic with a very high emotional IQ, and leaders everywhere at all levels can learn from Kristen. I know you are going to enjoy this thoughtful conversation, and as always, if you have questions, email us at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. Have a great week, dig in, and I'll see you next time. Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Jill. It's nice to see you.
It's good to see you too. All right, let's get at it. So tell our friends and listeners here the question that I ask everyone, and it is, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I've been listening to your podcast, and so I've been thinking about that question, actually, and two stories came to mind. So I think if you were to ask my family members, they might have said that I would have been a performer. I was remembering that my aunt and uncle, when I was really young, gave me a Muppets Little Miss Piggy microphone. There was a talking Miss Piggy and a microphone attached to it with a little wire. And when you sang or talked into it, it would move the Muppet. And I was obsessed with that.
It's amazing.
So that was something they would always tell me, you're such a ham and, you're going to be a performer. But really what I wanted to be was I actually wanted to be a business owner. I kind of knew the concept of an entrepreneur because my dad had to take over the family business when my grandfather had passed away suddenly. And so I watched him establish the culture for the business and be a leader. And when I was a little kid, I was trying to think of business ideas. I actually had a little toy assembly business for a while. I went around the neighborhood and passed out flyers saying that I would assemble toys because I knew parents hated to do that. So those were kind of my journey when I wanted to grow up.
What do you think you learned from seeing your dad step into that role?
I think work ethic. I think that's a thing universally for a lot of my family members was just work ethic. But I also saw a lot of caring and concern for the employees and also some of the complications of managing a family business.
I would imagine. And And also, was the family all working for the business, or was primarily your dad, and then employees that weren't related to the family?
Yes, several of his siblings. So his father had a partnership with some of his in-laws and other cousins. And so then my dad stepped into that role, but then some of my dad's siblings wound up working for the business as well.
That sounds like it could be a podcast in and of itself.
I'm sure it could be. I remember there used to be books around the house of managing a family business and things like that.
I saw a book recently called Cain and Abel at Work, and I was like, oh, and for anyone not sure, that's a biblical reference from Cain and Abel. They were brothers. They didn't get along so well, one could say. Anyway, yeah, no, I've heard that a lot about running family businesses and the nuances of the beauty of really creating a shared value-based business and also of creating legacy. So I love hearing that your family, do they still have the business, or do they ultimately sell it at some point?
They do. There's been different iterations. They've sold different components of it, and they've bought other things and reconfigured it. So yeah.
Neat. All right. So I would love you to take us through a high level, touch point of your career journey, so then we can get into where you are today.
Sure. I'll share a little bit. When I was thinking about your earlier question, I'll share a little bit of where I started. I actually went to college and majored in cognitive psychology. And I mentioned that because I think that's informed my approach to careers and decision making, because I studied how we make decisions, how the brain works. I had the good fortune of having Daniel Kahneman as one of my advisors. And
Wow.
One of the alumni of my school was Martin Seligman, who's kind of the father of positive psychology. And so I got to read about and learn about learned optimism, optimistic bias, and decision making, all those things in my formative years. And I know that really shaped how I interact with the world and how I've made decisions about my career. So I graduated in 2000. It was the tech bubble, and I actually joined a startup at that time. But over the years, I was always looking to learn about ways to run a business. And so I later worked in client side, like marketing roles, a lot of sales and marketing roles, places like Pfizer, places like General Mills, running brands like Nature Valley granola bars and Trick cereal. We also got to play with the Pillsbury Doughboy, which was really fun. And then I eventually found myself in sales back in the New York area, working on big sales teams. And I currently run a sales team at Google. And sometimes people ask, what do you sell at Google? And it's ads. The primary revenue driver for Google is the advertisements that you see in our search properties or on YouTube or on different websites around the internet. And so I run a team of people that partners with some of our largest clients to help grow their business.
What an amazing experience. And then also having the background of marketing, I would have to imagine it taught you more about going into the sales role. I mean, you had your basics in cognitive psychology, but then learning the application of marketing and then going into a sales role. Was it a conscious choice to then move into sales, or did it sort of just naturally happen?
I think it naturally happened over time. I chose the marketing role when I was at business school. I really got an understanding of what brand marketing was. And what I loved about it was that you had P&L ownership, right? You got to manage the full perspective of the business. And for me, wanting to be an entrepreneur, which I ultimately have done at different points in my career, I should say that too. Like I've stepped out of corporate and co-founded businesses. So I thought that would be a great holistic learning of the business, but also be able to get to stay close to creativity and connecting with consumers and understanding how to deliver a message. And the way I came to sales was I had transitioned to a strategy team inside of a company called WebMD, which was the largest health information platform in the US at the time. And the head of sales said, Kristen, you realize you're going to a lot of these client meetings and you're helping us close these deals. You could actually earn commission if you were to take on a sales team, which I thought was a great idea. And that was my entree into the sales side. And you're absolutely right. It helped me to have that marketing foundation in two ways. I could really empathize with the clients and understand how they're trying to run their business and formulate my proposals in a way that would, what I always tell my team is do the work for them. How can I deliver you a proposed solution that is going to be easy for you to fit it right into what your business planning is and not make you have to rethink or rejigger what you're doing? And then it also helped, frankly, from a network standpoint, right? I knew a lot of the people that had been my contemporaries, particularly in the CPG world, but also across healthcare and in some cases in automotive companies too. And I was able to reach back out to them as I was selling.
Oh, nice. And then again, a theme we talk a lot about on this podcast is to not have transactional relationships and to actually have relationships that build over years. So there's more evidence, folks, of when you're building those relationships, having, throughout your years, you're then going back to them and continuing to grow those. When you think about making that switch from marketing into sales, what is something you liked more than you thought you would?
I think I liked the ownership and having a quota, actually, and having responsibility for your business. I think that can be a fearful thing for some folks, to have that scoreboard that you're always moving towards of, am I going to hit my numbers? But I think more than I thought I would, I embraced it and see the opportunity of, well, how high is up? And can we exceed our targets, and then have some ownership over that? I feel like I'm a little bit more in control.
I feel like for anyone out there who runs their own business, what you just tapped on is even something that I deal with as a business owner, that, there are definitely things that are out of my control, but there's so much that's in my control to be able to figure out the way of, I love how you say, like, how high is up, to figure out a way to actually meet your quota or deliver against it. Or, I like to also think about it as like, can I turn the faucet on and off? Can I control that based on, what's going on in the marketplace? When you think about the idea of then applying, the business unit and the sales unit that you're running to owning a business, what sort of positive psychology or cognitive psychology tools did you use to keep yourself and your team focused on the end goal?
The first tool that I would say comes to mind, and I think it's ubiquitous when it comes to sales, or frankly, just communicating in the business world with one another, is clear communication and thinking about how we perceive. I spent a lot of time studying perception and understanding visual hierarchy of things. And in the sales world, we find ourselves making a lot of decks, whether they're Google Slides or PowerPoint or Keynote, and really making sure that things are clear. What is the main point that you want to communicate? Is that visually the largest thing on the slide? And is that popping off the slide for clients to understand? And finding ways to simplify and chunk information, right? There's this concept of how our brains process information around chunking and how much can you hold in your memory at a given period of time. And so some of those basic things were really critical for me. When it comes to another concept, I think about learned optimism. That was something that was really fundamental for me, coming from Martin Seligman. And so I try to infuse that with my teams, right? Like, how do we create a space of psychological safety? How do we build trust with one another? And then, look at the reality of a situation, but try to focus on, hey, we can take a positive outcome here. There are some things that are out of our control. In any major corporate environment, there are some things that are out of your control. But how do we look more broadly at what we might be encountering? Find something that we can control. Maybe it's our culture within our team. Maybe there are some things that have changed. Maybe the accounts that we're covering have changed, but we can control how we approach things any given quarter as a team. And can we create an environment that feels supportive and engaged so that people want to come to work and that we want to interact with our clients in a like positive and thoughtful way?
Yeah, it's really a testament to your leadership style. So I feel lucky that there's more people like you out there that are leading teams and really helping people. We can take on hard things, but we can also have a place where there's some level of trust and safety, because we're going to fail, we're going to mess up, people are messy, but that we're looking at that and figuring out how to evaluate and move forward. So I think that's a tremendous thing to have within your department within an organization. So that makes me think, when we're in a hybrid situation, right? Some of us are in the office, some of us are working remotely or somewhere in between. How did you potentially pivot to keep that level of trust with your team moving into a completely new environment?
I will say, I will tell you about some of the things I did, but I think it's an ongoing experiment. And I think that's the case for all of us. This probably harkens back to the cognitive psychology thing, right? But I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I'm constantly seeking new ways of doing things or consuming information, reading a lot of books, and then trying to share that back and process it and make it active. And so we tried a lot of things. In the hybrid environment at the outset, we had a team that had spent a lot of time together physically already. And so we had established relationships that we could trade on. We had established client relationships that we could, I say trade on, but we had established that trust. And so it was easier to interact with one another. In the early days, we did daily stand-up meetings to just check in. We put time on calendar to have informal connections as opposed to just formal connections. I tried to encourage people to think, if you would have turned your head to the person at the desk next to you to ask something, well, then ping them via chat, right? Reach out to them via Google Meet, grab the phone and call them. Do some other ways if you would have done that. Don't not do it just because you have the distance. Try to have that.
You're sitting at your kitchen table and you're not necessarily in that space. Right.
It became a little more challenging when the pandemic went on for a longer period of time, and I started to hire people on my team that I hadn't met physically in the real world. And so then we tried to be even more discerning about pre-hybrid. I had a thing with my team that we called We Come to You. And once a month, each team member hosts the thing. And the idea was we want to see you in your element, and that at work, you may not be your core element. And so what do you like to do? We'll all come to you to get to see that and experience that. And that could be, one person was super into workout classes. And so we all went to a workout class with her. One person really missed their comfort food from South Carolina. And so we did a tour of some of their favorite restaurants in New York that served that food, right? One person was into stand-up comedy. And so we went to a comedy club. And it was a really great way that we rotated around. And so we turned that into a hybrid thing, and someone hosted each time. One person, we did kind of pasta cooking online with one another. We built a terrarium because somebody was was interested in biospheres and things. And so I think just trying different types of things to stay connected in both formal and informal ways during this hybrid experience, I think is more important than ever.
Oh, gosh. I want to work for you. That's really beautiful. And it helps, again, I sit in this place where I'm going into organizations and helping them with team dynamics. And obviously I work with people one-on-one through executive coaching. And, it's these little things that we're not talking about the ping pong table, people. We're talking about creating relationships. And it's these little things that make people feel less lonely, makes them feel that they are a part of team, makes them feel that they can put their ideas out there and they're not going to be frowned upon or poo-pooed upon. It increases the work. It's diversity of thought, of people, of ideas. It's all of these things that really make such a difference in the workplace that I know, some companies are really embracing it and knowing that they're going to fumble along the way. Other companies are sort of in this holding pattern where they're afraid to do anything because they don't want to upset people. So in the meantime, you're upsetting people because you're not doing anything. And it's sort of all in between. So I just love hearing another example of what you share, that everyone could take a piece of that and implement it in their own organization. Beautiful.
One thing that I will mention, as you say that, Jill, is that I came up with that idea only because someone on my team said, I don't think we were really seeing each other in our best element. And I don't feel like I know the other people. This was many years ago, before we were all hybrid. And so I would really encourage people to advocate on behalf of what you think the needs are and try to come with your own solutions. No one's stopping you. I mean, I sort of operate with a motto of I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission. And particularly when it comes to these cultural touch points inside an organization, I would say, if you have the idea, try to just do it. And if necessary, raise it to your leadership and see if you can find somebody who will enable you to do it. I would guess that even if the first person doesn't say yes, you're going to find someone who will do it. But I think there's something to be said for everyone taking ownership and not just people with titles as leaders in organizations to help to shape that, because some of the best ideas come from my team members. I just help enable them to do it. And my goal is to create an environment where they're comfortable sharing their ideas, right? I'm always trying to hire people that are smarter than me and that know more and can do better. And so I consider it an act of facilitation rather than not. So if you are one of those people that feels like, I wish there was more, try to just take action on that.
Yeah. Really great point for people to take away. I love that. It's an act of facilitation. You don't necessarily have to have the idea. You just need to create the capacity to have the idea come to fruition for people. So it really that makes me think of a conversation that you and I have had over the last few months, because it around fit and fit for a job, right? This idea that being in a job and the fit that this is the right job for you isn't constant, right? It evolves. And I would love for you to just to share with our listeners what your take is on fit and how you navigate that both for yourself and others.
Sure. Too bad this isn't on video. I usually draw this messy hand-drawn chart with on the, the x-axis is time, and there's two lines, and one, line is you and one is the company. And at the point in time when you're interviewing and you secure a job with the company, the fit is pretty close. I would say that, like, let's think of, two lines going on a chart. The distance between them, it's not touching necessarily, but it's pretty close. There's probably a small delta between those two things. And that's great. But the reality is, over time, we're human beings. We're going to change, and we're not going to be exactly the same. And so you're going to change at some rate. And the company is an organization, and that's going to change too. And so the delta between where you are and the company is at any given point in time might change. What are some of those changes? For an individual, they could be life changes. I'm starting a family. I have a health issue. I learned a new skill, and I'm eager to move forward in a different direction than what my current role is, right? What are the changes that, like, the company may have? They may have made an acquisition. They may have made a divestiture. They may have, strategically tried to go in a different direction. They may have shrunk teams. They may have had to have layoffs in some way, shape, or form. And so when those deltas between where you are and where the company is get to a certain threshold, check in with yourself and say, like, hey, maybe this is a time to make a move. Maybe there's a time at big companies like Google, there's usually lots of opportunities in and around the organization. And so you can pick your head up and look across functions, look across roles, look across locations. But it may be the time to move on and look for something else. And then, for people that experience layoffs or downsizing or things like that, it's not a comment on, or frankly, I think back to my startup, I think back to a lot of organizations I've been in. As a leader, you sometimes have to let people go. And it's usually not the quality of the human as an individual or their capabilities. It is the circumstances and the match of their skill set and what they're looking for to that particular role at that time. So even if you were to stay the same over a long period of time, there's a likelihood that the company is not going to stay exactly the same and have changed at that exact pace. So I've just found that, like, that's how I approach things. When I feel like, this is not a close fit, what I want to be doing, am I challenged enough? Do I want to go seek a new challenge? Then I go look for those opportunities, first inside the organization and then beyond. Or if, I find myself in circumstances where the company's really changed and this doesn't work, it's not a commentary on you and your ability and your capacity to have a fantastic career. It's just the circumstances of fit. And we're all evolving, ever-changing organisms. Yeah. So take that as an opportunity and think about, okay, what do I want to do? It's a big world out there. What do I want to do next? And don't take it as an assessment as to you or your abilities.
Right. So that brings up two questions that I'll ask you at a time. One, so what strategies would you recommend for proactively managing and adapting one's career to fit over time?
There's two that come to mind. So one is really check in with yourself, like really be clear. I think I've heard you talk about this too, Jill, right? Like, what are your values? What are your career goals? Do you have a vision for what you want your life to look like? And, for me, I would encourage you to say, like, think about your career in the context of your whole life. And it's not just about your job. Think about what you need at any given point in time. And do you need more work, more challenge at work, more of this, or do you need more outside of work with your community, with your family, et cetera? And I think if you are clear on what those values are, what those skills that you might want to be building, what those goals that you have, then check in with yourself, often, once a quarter, once a month, I would say more than once a year in some cases, to say, hey, is this right? Am I actually spending my time and spending my days in line with what my values are? So that's one thing. And that can help you say, oh, wait a second. I'm spending more of my day doing all these operational charts and forecasting. My time used to be spent out and about with clients. I really was thriving when I was spending more time with clients. Can I make that shift, or is this role becoming something that's more operational? And then I may need to find another role. The other thing that I would think about that I've been spending a lot more time with in the last, 4 or 5 years is get an outside perspective. Talk to a friend, talk to a colleague, get a coach. I read this book, $1 Trillion Coach, which is the story of Bill Campbell, who was a guy who coached Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt at Google, all these prominent leaders in Silicon Valley, Coach Sheryl Sandberg. And when I read this, I thought, wow, all these people they're not doing it on their own. They have a coach helping to reflect back to them. And then I got to thinking, as a sports fan, you know who else has a coach? All the greatest athletes of all time.
Exactly.
LeBron James has a coach. Serena Williams has a coach. Roger Federer has a coach. So it made me want to get coaches. So I promptly went out and hired some
Good,
coaches.
Exactly.
But I think that it's important to know that all the best have that, because you can't see yourself, and having that somebody else reflect back to you what they're seeing can help you process. And I found that incredibly useful in assessing fit over time and what might come next.
I love it. So to recap, it's the self check-in with values, which also sounds like checking in with your strengths, because if you find yourself previously in a role that was more relationship driven and now all of a sudden it's more operational driven, that might be a values misalignment, and then also not necessarily using your strengths. The second thing I'm hearing is that outside perspective, whether it's a mentor, if you can find an unbiased friend or family member, or actually going forth and hiring a coach, that exact as you said, all the best athletes have coaches, and they don't just have coaches for how to strengthen their physical body. It's also how to strengthen their mind. LeBron James has talked a lot about mindset and how he and the team have prepared over the years for getting on the court and the challenge of getting on the court. So right up my alley with that on what you've said. And the other thing that you said that kind of feeds into the next question, you said before about how you may even be consistent, but maybe your company is taking a different position, is this idea that when you tie your value and your own self-worth so connected to your job, I get it. It's what brings us in money. It brings us purpose. It makes us potentially make a difference in our lives. I understand why jobs are so important, and they do connect in with our identity. But when you're in a marketplace, especially as tech and marketing have taken a bit of a hit over this year, again, unemployment is still low, wages are still high, but we're talking about two sectors that have experienced, above indexing on laying offs and reorganizations. I find a lot of people, especially if their job search is going on for a while, they really take it about their self-worth and that they are maybe valued less because they are in a position where they're going to get reorged out, or they already have been reorged. From your experience, how would individuals disconnect their self-worth from the company's strategic decisions so that they can maintain their own confidence?
I think it's important to establish connections and community outside the company. I think that, and I understand that it's really hard, particularly in the modern world. We have these major organizations who have, you've referenced the ping pong tables before, Jill, right? Who have created all these facilities, and a lot of people have food in their offices, all the things to try to keep you there as much as possible and take on as much of your time as possible so that you're fueling all of your energy towards the organization. But I think it's so important to have other communities that you interact with. If you love to play sports, join the urban professionals basketball league in the city, or play tennis or pickleball or whatever your thing is. I find an outlet for service, whether that is via religious affiliation. There's so many different nonprofits and community organizations, because you can bet like they will value any and all of your skills, and you can find a way to really do some good in the world and feel that reciprocation that comes with giving and then giving back. I would say stay connected to other networks, whether you have an alumni network. I'm close to some of my alumni networks in a major way, but there are all kinds of professional networks, or even the little, I don't want to say little things, but do you love to read? Do you have a book club? Do you have a dinner club, right? You could have a group of people that you go to dinners with. There's a former colleague of mine in Chicago who had created this concept called Table for 12. And he would book a reservation at like a cool or hard to get restaurant for 12 people. And he would send an email out to his whole network. It would include some of his colleagues, some of his clients, some of his friends, some of his neighbors. And the first 12 people to respond would get to go that month. And he would keep it very much to the first 12 people. And it would create this eclectic group. But then they all formed relationships and connections with one another. And it became the Table for 12 group, on and on. Yeah. And I thought that was genius. So it doesn't even have to be a specific affiliation. It can be the restaurants that you like to go to, but find community connections, and then find ways to, with the people that you trust among them that are deserving of it, be vulnerable with, hey, here's what I'm feeling. And they will reflect back to you. It's not about like your human values. There are some circumstances going on in the market, and they may have ideas for help to direct you in a way that can be fulfilling.
Yeah, I think it's just a beautiful response, and so true from what I've seen with many of my clients too, and also myself. There's been times where I've been unemployed. I always joke that my career was a signing bonus and a severance package, because when you work in tech and marketing, it's like, there you go. And it's easy to joke when I'm not necessarily in it, but finding that way to find your value. And I think the other thing that you didn't say, but it's sort of reading between the lines is what I heard, is that I think in the United States, especially, it happens elsewhere in Western, philosophy, but I think especially here, we so often confuse our purpose with what we do to make money. Mm-hmm. And you can make money, and maybe it is your purpose. And you know what? Go with God, man. Like, if you can figure that out and that works for you, have at it. But for many of us, we're doing something for income and from work that, we like enough, but maybe isn't our quote purpose. And finding a way to, the two of them can be held differently, right? You can have something that you do for work, and then you can have things that, as you mentioned, sports, your alumni group, potentially a religious or a belief-based organization, your family. There's lots of other things that may align to your purpose. One of my personal desires is to be inspired and to inspire others. That may or may not happen at work. I mean, I hope it continues to happen within workplaces and work environments. But when you're clear in something like that, you can find all the different ways in which that can help. And that is what that esteemable acts and building that self-worth is really what will help you get through some of the challenges and pivots that will happen, in your career.
Absolutely. And I think it's even more important than ever, because in the modern workplace, you don't have examples of people that have a 40, 50-year career at one place and then get a pension. Right. It doesn't work like that. We don't have pensions anymore, really. We have 401ks. And so you have to be more of a free agent about your career and think about, what are the skills that I'm building? How am I bringing value here? Maybe this role I'm taking because I need to earn a living, and this is how I need to support things. But I have these that's what we talk about. I think decoupling your purpose from your job and your career, and think about your whole life. Right. It's important. And think about, look, life is fragile too, right? A lot of some of my perspective on life has been shaped by losses. And, I keep that in mind, thinking about, what if there wasn't a 10-year, right? Yeah. What if I only had 1 year? What would I do? And that can seem troubling to some people, but I don't mean it in that way. I mean it in like, it can be very clarifying. If you were to think in that way, like, how does that clarify things for you? Does that help you discern what you might want to do next, or what your values actually are and what you care about? And help to sort of push away the distractions that are so easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I get on LinkedIn and it's hard not to get into that mindset of comparison right. And all of a sudden then comparison is the thief of joy. And I'm, what am I doing? But when you can put yourself into that different mindset, not forever, but just to help guide you and to help get you in better touch with what are those values? What do you think your purpose is? If you don't have a clearly defined purpose, that's okay.
Right. It's okay. It's definitely okay. So you touched on decisions and discernment. And I know something that you and I have talked about before is, both of our belief systems and a lot that we do around mindset. And I love your perspective on this. And I was hoping that you would share with our listeners how you approach, discernment for career decisions.
Sure. And for background for people, I was introduced to this concept of discernment. I think it's originally a Jesuit concept, but you do not have to take this as religious in any way, shape, or form. I had gone to a retreat years ago where it was literally about discernment for career decisions. And that had a religious bent to it. But I've since kind of modified the series of questions that they had walked us through in the retreat and shared it with lots of friends and colleagues over the years. And many have found it useful. And it's really about a process of, can you get in touch with your gut? For some of us, I think it's harder to really get in touch with what our gut sensibility is. And so to simplify it, take an example of a decision that you're making. And it's really helpful if you can structure it as a, one option or another option. So you have that in mind. Then step back and think about a time when you made a decision that you think was less optimal. And just visualize yourself. What did you feel? What did you think? What came up for you? Then think about a time you made a good decision that you were really happy with, that had a really positive impact on your life. Again, what were you feeling? What was the environment like? What were you thinking? And then come back to this decision that is currently you're presented with and take the least attractive option, right? The option that you think is not the attractive one for you now. And picture yourself a couple years out, maybe it's 2 years out. You've made that decision. What does life look like now? Where are you? What are you thinking about? What are you doing? How do you feel? And really let that sink in. And sometimes it can be very surprising what comes up for you. And then take the alternative. Say, okay, well, that seemed like the least attractive option. What did that feel like? Let's take the most attractive option that seems like the thing that I should be going with. What does that feel like? And then, you step back from all of that. And I think work through those responses, because things will come up for you, whether it's sensations. And some folks find that it's sensations in their body. For me, it's things that kind of pop into my head unexpectedly. And inevitably, it helps you identify something. You get a sense of, oh, I didn't realize this. Or maybe I was trying to convince myself of something, but deep down somehow, I think this is what's pulling me. Or you realize what was the least attractive option. Actually, it's not so bad. Like that could be great. And I actually prefer it more. So it's really a framework to help you get in touch with the sensibility of your gut, which candidly, like as we're learning, right? Like I staring at my bookshelf, there's another book called The Extended Mind by Annie Murphy Paul. That's, we as humans take in information in so many different ways through all of our senses. And it's important to tap into that as we're making decisions. And you can activate those parts of your brain, activate all of those systems by going through a process like this, whether it's this one or another one. But I would just encourage you to take that time out to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, really dead on. And I love the simplicity of it, of just, there's no fancy tools. There's your brain, okay, maybe a notebook and a pen, right? Or a notes app, but just really thinking through and thinking through those various options. Reminds me of a client who recently decided to leave a job that she knew she could have for life, meaning the benefits, what she was doing, how it was showing up, the way she was integrated into it. She easily could have stayed there for the rest of her life, for as long as she started and wanted to work. And so there was a lot of discernment in there, and then realizing that there were things that were missing and making the choice. And the choice next, I mean, it's not jumping off a cliff, but the choice next, there's a lot of unknowns, but it fulfilled the area that she was finding that she was missing in what she was doing for, like we do, hopefully 40 hours, but some of us 60 hours a week, right? So that simplicity of tapping into your gut, thinking through two options, and really thinking about your future self, like what would your future self want and how this could play out. I love it. Kristen, this has been so, I love it. Just so simple, so helpful, really great nuggets throughout this. And more people would be really fortunate if they had you as their supervisor or leader. So thank you for sharing honestly about your work, the work that you do, and really also an inspiration for other leaders and what some of the things that they could follow. So I appreciate that.
That's very kind of you to say, Jill. I always love engaging in conversation with you. I always learn new things and it sparks creative ideas. So thanks for having me. It's been a delight.
Awesome. All right, everyone. So thank you again for being here. If you have any questions, you can email them to hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. We can get those questions to Kristen, and we can maybe even have her come back if that's what all of you want to hear more of. So thanks for listening. Have a great week, and I will see you next time. Hey, thanks for listening to the Career Refresh podcast. If you're enjoying this and you want more information, go to my website, jillgriffincoaching.com. There you can find information on how to work with me one-on-one, or my group programs, or even bring me into your workplace. I'll put the link to my website in the show notes. But hey, listen, before you go, do me a favor, rate and review this podcast, because it definitely helps me get the word out to people everywhere so that they can also thrive in the workplace. All right, friends, I appreciate you. I'll see you soon.